10-year-old, the case is gone, and then the screen, I bought this extra, which I think thought was the most durable. It's cracked. So it's Zag and yeah.
Yeah, Zag has a lifetime, I'm pretty sure. Call them up and they'll send you a new one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Because I was gonna make him pay for it with his own money. I figured because.
Well, you can still do that.
No, I know. I just automatically said, well, I'll look for something. Oh, but then the case. I had even looked at OtterBox, but they doesn't. The other ones, when you close them, they go to sleep. Right. I mean, it doesn't. Then the battery's not drained, but the OtterBox.
I tend to see the OtterBox as a little more rugged, but it adds more bulk that some people don't like.
But I have that
Is this
on my
working?
phone, but I mean, doesn't it go to sleep when you're not using it?
Yeah, they all do. Well, if you tell them to, that's a setting. But it adds more bulk. All right. That some people don't like. Let me turn the volume down here because our stream is working. All right. So welcome everyone to the Apple CIDER Saturday Q&A for Saturday, February 17th. As we started going, we had a question about putting your iPad to sleep. And that's working. Pardon? When the iPad is asleep, it uses a lot less power. Yeah, so auto lock puts the screen to sleep, and it saves battery power. But then when you push either the home button or the wake button, it wakes up almost instantly, so you don't have to wait for the whole thing to boot completely. And in the settings app, so let me go all the way, let's go back to home here, and I will need to get this to fill the screen. Where's the right button here? Full screen. All right, so fill the screen. So the settings app, look, settings, and then, okay, it didn't change. Why not? Let me get back to my mirroring option here. There we are. It doesn't want to mirror my iPad. So under settings, there is a setting for auto lock, and you can set, there we are, you can set how fast you want it to lock. And I always have trouble finding where they moved things to. So one of the things you can do when you can't find a setting is on the left-hand column, if you swipe all the way down to see the top of the column, there's a search. And then you can search for something. Let me see if I search for sleep. No, that's not what it would look for. So you have to know it's called auto lock. And it's under display and brightness. And so you can choose whether you want the iPad to lock and unlock if you have a cover that supports locking and unlocking. So when you close the cover, it will lock it and go to sleep. And you can also choose the duration, how long of idle before it goes to sleep. The longer you let it idle before sleep, so if you set it to 15 minutes, then you use more power. And your battery can drain faster because it's sitting there idle for 15 minutes before it goes to sleep. For some people, 2 minutes is too fast. They might be reading a screen and it goes to sleep. So you can change it and play with it and see what works best for you. When I'm doing demos, I'll often set it to never, so it doesn't go to sleep during my demo. But then sometimes I'll forget to put it back down, so then my battery drains, and I'm wondering why. The other neat thing, feature that display and brightness has, well, first, if you've got the actual slider bar that controls the brightness of the screen. The brighter you make the screen, the more power it uses. So a lot of people like to keep theirs a little bit dimmer because it doesn't use as much power. And then there's an option called night shift. And what night shift does is it shifts the color balance of the screen more toward the warmer yellows rather than the harsher blues. And what that means is your screen gets a little warmer at night and is often easier to read. And one of the things we've seen, there is some anecdotal evidence that the bright blue end of the spectrum light is what wakes you up in the morning. So that's sort of programmed into our brains from um, um, prehistory, where you had to escape from the predators who came out at dawn, so you better wake up at dawn so you can run away from them. You can't see it on the projector screen, but as I'm sliding the color temperature, the iPad screen gets more warm, so it gets very yellow, or less warm, it gets more blue. And so there's an auto schedule. So I've got mine scheduled for 8 p.m. to 9 a.m. So automatically at night it will shift down. So when I like to read before I go to bed, and so I'm not getting this really bright white light in my face that often can tell your brain it's time to wake up. So that can potentially keep you awake at night if you like to read in the dark. Something like that, yeah. So it can help you go to sleep, or at least prevent you from staying awake so much.
That's why no electronic devices an hour before bedtime, right? I mean,
Yeah, one of those.
unless you
Yep.
have this feature on
Yeah.
your
Now there's a program for the Mac called f.lux, and I think they are going to build it into the OS itself. Let me see, under just, yeah, Night Shift. Yes, it is now built into the OS, called Night Shift as well. So you can schedule it to happen. You can also schedule it to do sunrise to sunset. So it knows your location and your time zone, and so it can automatically go from sunrise to sunset rather than scheduling it for a specific time to start and end. So that's in System Preferences under Display. So a lot of people like to have that option so that they don't have to worry about changing it all the time. Now I'm going to go turn my mirroring back off so we get back to the computer.
While you're in settings, this is sort of like no big deal, but whenever I would send an email and I would hit send, I would get the swoosh, which was fine. And I now all of a sudden we're not getting the swoosh. So what did I change that I don't hear the swoosh when I send an email?
So in the settings, there are sound options. So in settings under sound, and there is a sound for sent mail.
Right.
So when you send a mail, you get swoosh. When you receive a mail, you get ding.
Except I probably don't have that on.
It may not be turned on, or your volume may be muted.
Oh yeah, better check.
And so check your mute volume
So
to see if you're accidentally muted.
Where? Well, wait a minute. Okay, so I am. Oh, okay, I was. All right.
So one of the things I've added to the control center now is a volume control, so you can quickly control your volume,
Right, yeah.
and you can use the buttons on the iPad itself to go up and down. Now, as the older iPad used to have a slide switch that would actually would a physical switch you could slide to mute the device. But they removed that on the newer iPads because you just hold the volume down button for a little bit and it mutes it. When you're on a phone, the phone still has the physical mute switch because with a phone you often want to mute it when you go movie theater or whatnot. So they still have a physical volume control switch on the phone itself. The other thing that can happen is where you're sending the sound. So again, in the control strip, the sound control, which is called music, there's a little a bar that's telling me I have options to where my sound is going. So I can send the sound to the iPad speakers, to my computer, or to my AirPods. So if you're using like a Bluetooth headset or Bluetooth speakers, the sound still may be going there. If those speakers are off, it still may be set to send the sound there anyway. So that could be why you don't hear it as well.
Well, I hit somehow or another it was on mute. A lot of stuff I think you just do.
You do it accidentally, yeah.
Yeah.
Now here's okay. So then my husband should be the one who comes here sometimes because he asks me the questions. But so he was going to look at his news. So he has this news app.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, when you tap on it, I mean, if he wants to tap and read something, it's not showing up. Oh, now it just did.
Is this like a news station? Like
Just like he's
Or
got a new.
is it the Apple News app, or is it a third-party app?
It's the red one with the.
Yeah, that's the Apple News app. The first time you open it, it asks you what news sources you like, and then it will fill in from there. And as you tap on news sources to read more about them, it will learn what types of things you like and will give you more of those.
Just just before when I was home, he went to read something, and he tapped on it, and it didn't open up, and now it is. And I was on Wi-Fi at home, so I don't know why that. Actually, it wasn't working before either. When I was just sitting over there when I came in, I was trying it and it didn't open. So here's another thing. What did I do something in settings that?
Probably not, but so the basic question is the app wouldn't open. There's a couple of things you can do when there's weirdness like that happening. One is to quit all the background apps. So if you double press the home button or bring up the control strip, yeah, you can swipe up on all of the background apps. If you're really good, you can do 4 at a time with 4 fingers. I've tried 6 at a time, but I haven't got the dexterity to do 6 at a time.
I did. There weren't tons and tons of them, but I did. I mean, there were only about 6 open, which I did clear off.
Yeah.
You swipe up on your phone now? Is that how you do? Because it used to be.
You double tap the home button or swipe up from the bottom. I think I have to switch my AirPods here because I'm running out of juice.
The other thing is like Safari. If you go touch Safari and then I did that, then I've got a whole bunch of stuff.
Yes, similarly in Safari, you can have a bunch of different tabs open. And so you can go to your tab viewer to see all the tabs you might have open. And we've run into people that, without realizing it, have hundreds of tabs open. So sometimes when you tap on a link in a website, it will open that link in the same tab, or sometimes it opens a new tab, which means you can go back to the old tab to see where you came from. So a lot of websites now are opening things in the second tab. And so you can end up with too many tabs open. And Safari can start getting bogged down. And so you can go into your tab view, and I can hit the X here to delete a few things. It depends on the OS. In my iPad, Let me get that window back open. It's in the upper right corner. This window. No, I want air server. Where's my air server window closed? Let me turn that back on again. The plus button opens a new tab manually, and the
How come that, is this supposed to be
the
on the screen?
I'm trying.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
It's not coming up like it's supposed to. Show all windows. No windows available. Why not? So the plus button makes a new tab, and then next to the plus button are two little squares. There we are. I don't know why the screen is so small. Let me make it bigger. So we'll go to Safari. So in the upper right corner is the tab window that will show you all of the tabs you have open. And then you can close the ones you don't need anymore. And many times you might have too many tabs open without realizing it. So if you tap and hold on the tab button, it will tell you how many tabs you have open already. Yeah, so in Safari, you're
Yeah, okay.
so that shows you all the tabs you have open.
Which, okay,
So
yeah.
right now
I
you just have one.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Thank you. What's that mean between private and done?
Private browsing is a feature that the browser won't remember anything about what you've done. It doesn't remember websites you go to, doesn't remember your search history, your autofill history, so that if someone else sits down at your computer, they can't see what you've been doing. In the early days, we jokingly called that the porn filter, so that your spouse doesn't see what porn you go to.
I absolutely used to look at my husband.
Pardon?
Maybe the roofie filter.
Yeah.
The thing is that your it doesn't mean that. Well, I'm not sure here because I've tried to use that in both Safari and in Chrome. And I mostly use Chrome just because I have for a while. And in that, I don't know whether like Google is still keeping track of where I've gone.
Oh,
in other words, the history in the computer may not say so, but do I start getting ads for things that I looked at when I was in incognito or private?
Right, so that's the question. Your browser doesn't store anything, but it's likely that Facebook and Google and other websites you go to still do.
Sites that you went to, right? Because
Yeah.
the thing is, if I'm looking up stuff, let's say I'm in Chrome but I'm searching for things. When I'm searching, I'm actually searching in Google's search engine, not the browser, right? So as the browser may not remember where I went, but Google's search engine may.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes. So your browser doesn't remember, but well, your ISP knows because they took you there. Google knows because that's what you searched for. But any cookies that website may have set are not accessible. Autofill settings are not accessible. So a lot of times what you can do is use that to see if there's any difference in what the website looks like. There's something on the internet known as the filter bubble, that you see search results based on your past searches. So if you routinely search for conservative things, you may not see a liberal thing, and vice versa. And there have been some really interesting cases shown. I haven't confirmed it yet, but there was one the other day in the Wall Street Journal that in one city it was a picture of President Trump doing something, and the caption was Trump gets tough on something. And in another city, same day, same newspaper, same picture, with a different caption. Trump discussing so and so. And the concern is that, that was probably a pro-Trump thing about fake news. The concern is that based on your previous searching, you're going to see stuff you agree with.
I'm sorry, but I just sort of caught on to what you were saying. Is this the idea that, for example, in one city, you look at an article in, let's say USA Today, something like that, and you see the picture and you see one caption on it. In another city, you look at that article again in USA Today, but you see a different caption on it.
Yes.
So same
And the example I saw was an actual printed newspaper from different cities.
and the same paper.
Yes.
So in other words, it's not like it's the Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post or something.
Right. The same paper can give you two different results, two different slants, depending on the neighborhood you are in or the state you're in, which way that community leans.
And you say this was a printed on paper.
The example I just saw the other day was the Wall Street Journal.
Okay, well, okay, that's why my next question was going to be what newspapers would appear in that form in different cities, but that's an example of one that would.
Right, and theoretically any of them could.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
Well, and that goes back. The idea is to sell newspapers. So if you're in a liberal city, you're going to have liberal headlines. If you're in a conservative city, you're going to have conservative headlines.
right, different editions of the same paper, yeah, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Now, did you say, because I was not paying attention, 100%. And private settings, if you're looking at airline information, and you're in private and you're on Southwest Airlines, do they know you looked yesterday and the day before and a week ago for the same flights when you're in private?
So yeah, the question is, does a website know you've been to that website before? In private browsing, generally no, because they can't access the cookie. So when you go to a website, it sets a cookie that you're there, and remembers the stuff you've done, and that we joke about that. That's why you search for a raincoat and then start seeing ads for raincoats on completely unrelated pages.
Yeah, or the exact thing you looked at.
Right. And that's because Amazon and Google and Facebook, they all have ads, and the ads talk to each other because they're all almost always the same ad companies. So in private browsing mode, it doesn't know where you were because it can't look at those cookies.
But then it won't save
But
it.
right, it doesn't save your information when you want it to.
would let's say the airlines you mentioned have information as to your IP address that you would.
Yes, your IP address is always known because it has to know where to send the data back to.
Right, and
So it seems like it would know it.
Right. And because of the way the internet was set up in the beginning, IP addresses are geographically located and known. So, and that's the way routers were set up, East Coast, West Coast. So a router sees a packet with an address 65, it sends it off to the West Coast. East Coast. Yeah, low numbers are on the West Coast because that's where the internet started. So the higher numbers get sent to the east, toward the east, because that's geographically where it is. So it's easy to look up an IP address and find out geographically where it is.
But was the point of your question that they would raise the prices for you on succeeding days?
Yeah, so
there are additional allegations, not just raising the prices because you keep looking. There are additional allegations that if it knows you're on a Mac, it will raise the price versus on a Windows machine, because Macs generally cost more, so they're generally sold to people with more money.
So in other words, they're going to know my IP address, so they're going to know
your geographic location in general.
I've been looking for the same route for several times, so my price could be going up even if I'm in private browsing.
Theoretically, yes.
Because here I've been using my iPad to search.
Okay.
But then when I go to make up my mind, I'll probably use my desktop at home. But I've also been using some of these computers because they're cleared every night. But that probably doesn't.
Well, and I see this a lot too. My son will search for something on his device, and then I start seeing ads for stuff he searched for. because I have his Amazon wish list on my Amazon account. So Amazon knows he searched for it.
Does
And
he know? Does your son know?
yeah, and he's got mine on his. So Amazon knows that, and so gives me ads based on his wish list.
If she were to look up this airline information through a VPN, would they know that it was her day after day?
So a VPN, we had a couple of questions like this on Soundbites. A VPN can mask. It's a virtual private network,
Oh, okay.
and it's a way of yeah.
Except that it goes through a bunch of servers until they don't know where they are.
Wrong button. So a VPN is a way of hiding where you are on the internet. In the early days, it was just used, and the cable came loose, so let's see if it comes back. In the early days, it was used for large companies. You're working from home, and so you have a virtual private network to the office, and it's as if you're in the office. So your computer thinks it's in the office, and you can see all the office servers and stuff. So it's using the public internet as a virtual server between the two locations. A lot of people now are using a VPN to hide their geographic location. Um, one of the biggest reasons we're seeing now is to get around content blocking. For example, BBC TV shows are available to the public in England because the BBC is a government-run organization. If you're not in England, you can't watch those BBC shows. So what people do is they'll get a VPN that comes out in London. So now your computer thinks it's in London, and the BBC webpage or the iPlayer app thinks you're in London and will now play those shows.
But the thing is, you can get one of those, but it's going to cost you so many dollars a month.
Yeah, generally VPN services have a monthly fee. There are ways to set up one yourself. They can help anonymize you, but they're not what people think they are. A lot of people talk, well, I connect to a VPN and then nobody knows who I am. Well, yeah, they still do because you went to Facebook. So they know who you are. They just don't know how you got there. So they don't know what street you used to get there, but they know you're there. There is a different technology called the onion router or Tor that's used for more anonymity. So that's what you were talking about earlier. So instead of you going to a website, you go to this server, which goes 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 to the website. So the website doesn't know where you came from. And so the police can't trace you back to where you came from. So again, it's used for a lot of criminal activities, but also for political dissidents and for legitimate reasons as well. But what we've been hearing through the different NSA leaks is that the NSA, FBI, other government agencies will run Tor servers. So your data will probably end up going through a police organization anyway.
You know, this is one of those moments that makes me wish I could live forever, because I just accidentally found out that Tor stood for the onion.
The onion router. It's layers of like an onion. It's made of layers.
This is I have been asking people, not because I want to buy drugs or whatever illicit activities, but I've been asking people about the deep web and the dark web.
Mm-hmm.
And the answers I get from people, it's not that they speak to me as if I'm a little child, but it's sort of the way you would handle a question about something dicey from a kid, which is to try not to answer it and just make him go away. And the thing is that, you know, I hear about these things, I'm curious about them, I want to know what it's about. I don't intend to get on the thing, but it's, for instance, it's like matter and dark matter in the universe or something like this. We only see a fraction of what's out there. Well, I'm told that you know, things like Google's search engine are only getting a very small percentage of what's actually on the internet.
Yeah, Google searches the public internet. It doesn't search private servers, private networks, you know, the Tor networks.
Until a couple of months ago, or so, well, in order to get on the either the deep or the dark web, the dark I think is a part of the deep, but I'm not sure. You have to have an onion router. And then, of course, in the same conversation, somebody mentioned Tor, but it wasn't until right now that you turned Tor into the onion router.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. But one of the comments they made was that that was originally set up for like military traffic or governmental traffic or something like that, and they made it available to the general public so that the content going through it from the general public would make it harder to pick out the military stuff or something. I don't know if that makes any sense or if it's true, but you see what I'm saying. In other words, it was a way to just dilute the data that they wanted to protect.
Yeah, the U.S. Navy Research Lab was the original core concept, according to Wikipedia. Um, to make it harder to trace. So you've probably seen that in movies where someone's trying to trace a phone call and we're bouncing it on all these different cities. That's what the onion router does for web traffic. It makes it harder for you to be traced. And so what has happened is that there's a lot of criminal activity on onion servers because they're hiding in this private area of the internet.
Carol, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's right.
I do want to mention what actually motivated me to get here today. We don't have to do it right now, but I'm not sure how much time it might involve, and since we only have another hour and a half, and that's just that and maybe 2 meetings ago at CIDER or something like this, you mentioned some things that were advisable to do. That was the motivation behind my getting the malware fights and stuff like that and so on. But one of the things you mentioned was the business of an administrative user versus what I guess would be called a standard user. And we don't have to get into this and try to solve it right now, but do you mind if I take a couple minutes to explain what the situation is?
Sure.
You were talking about the problem where you're on the internet, you go to a website, and there's an ad or something on there that drops malware into your computer without your doing anything. You don't have to click on it or anything else like that. Now, where I got a couple problems with this, and it seemed to me that you were implying that if I were routinely using my MacBook in the status of a standard user rather than administrative, it would be harder for that malware to be accepted into the computer. Now, so what has happened is this: when I bought the computer, they set it up at the Apple store, and they made me the user, and of course they made me an administrative user, and I have remained that administrative user for like 10 years on the classic MacBook here. And well, maybe it's time for me to get on the stick and do this thing and create a standard user. Now, one of the things that does bug me, and you hit this sort of earlier when you were trying to search for something in the iPad setting, is that with Apple, it does help if you're kind of psychic and you know what they call it. Because I spent some time, I spent a few hours on this thing dealing with this, and in the course of that, I saw a couple of interesting statements, and I'm darned if I could find them for you now. I had gone into, on the MacBook, I'd gone into system preferences, and I'd gone into users and groups, where you can create a new user or something like that, right? So far, so good. And the statements I saw, the two statements I saw that were interesting were this. So let me backtrack a second. When you were talking about this in the meeting, it seemed to me, I may have misunderstood or misremembered, but it seemed to me that you said the easiest way to do this would be to create, let's say you're right now you're in the status where you have only one user on your MacBook, and it's an administrative level user. The easiest way to end up with an administrative and a standard user would be to create a new administrative user and then turn the old administrative user into a standard user. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, here's where the things I saw from Apple come into it. Two factors. One is that as far as that is concerned, anything I saw in terms of changing the status of a user was about turning a standard user into an administrative user and nothing about going the other way around. And that matched my experience when I attempted to do it. And I even actually managed to go into the thing as a root user to try to get that administrative user. So that's one factor. And that's, unless you have done that, if you have done that, then you know how. But the other thing is that somewhere in the comments from Apple was that a standard user can still install apps, I think was the way they put it, or something like that. So my question is, of course, a standard user would have a password, and if they tried to download something to put into their MacBook, the MacBook would presumably ask for the password. Where is the enhanced security of the standard user from random drop-in things if standard users can also install? Am I making sense?
Yeah, there's several different concepts are going here. So let's start maybe at the beginning. When you set up your device for the first time, you create a username and password, and that username that's created is an administrator user. And administrator has special permissions to do administrative stuff, changing settings, installing programs, connecting to networks, things like that. The administrator has these special permissions to do different things. A standard user does not. They also have username and password, but they don't have permission to do administrative functions.
They can't change another user's status, for example.
Right. Well, the administrator can't either, in many cases. But a standard user generally can't change system settings. You can't install software. Um, there are things a standard user can't do.
See, that's why I wish I could find that statement from Apple. Like, yeah,
Well, it's kind of right. So we'll start with that concept. The administrator user is a special user. There is actually a user called root, which is depending on what direction you think about it, it is a lower level user. It's the root of the tree, and is sometimes called God user because it can do anything. It can delete the operating system. Um, whereas admin user, it won't let you. Standard user, it won't let you. So root can do anything. So by default, the root user is disabled on the Mac because it's so dangerous. We actually remember in college, one of the system administrators was doing some maintenance. He was in the root user and deleted a folder, forgot he was the root, and ended up deleting the operating system on our VAX mini computer. So we had to have people from Digital Equipment Corporation fly in from Boston um, to reload the OS on the machine. And it was, three guys showed up. They put a tape on the spool, hit run, and said, well, all right, let's go to lunch. Then 3 hours later, it was done because the root can do anything. So root user is off by default. In fact, you might remember a bug a few months ago, the root user bug, where the root user got enabled with an empty password. So anyone could log into your computer using root, the username of root, with no password. And Apple fixed that. The interesting bug was there's two tests when you type a username and password. Is it can you check for the password? Is the first question, and the answer to that was yes. The second question, does the password match? And someone forgot to add that question in. So when you log in as root, can you check for the password? Yes. Does the password match? No. Was never asked, so it let them in.
now, what I ended up doing here as a result of like maybe some forum or something I saw online, once I got decided that I was going to get that Charles Bergener administrator once and for all or whatever, and log in as root to do it. You went through directory
Yeah, it's tricky to enable root because it's so dangerous. And Jen, if you did turn it on, you should turn it off immediately.
No, no, it wasn't that hard.
Yeah.
It
Well, it's in directory utility.
directory utility, and you found it, and it was a thing to enable.
Right, but directory utility itself is hidden
For a reason.
Yes,
because it's so
is
dangerous.
that in the library that you only find if you do the option?
Yeah.
Okay.
And in fact, in later systems, it's even harder to find. It's buried in core services under the system folder.
Anyway, I was able to find it without a great deal of difficulty. I found that the enable thing, and I
Yeah.
believe when I said yes enable, then it asked me to create a password
Right.
for root, and I did that. And then I went out and I logged out me as the user, the administrative user, and I logged in as root with that password. And then I went back into users and groups and tried to turn my administrative user into a standard user or whatever the heck I could do. I got a little farther than I had gotten before, but not far enough.
Right. Because you must have an admin user. So hang on a second. Let's finish three of your earlier concepts. So the administrative user has privileges to, and then we'll get back to that. Has privileges to install things, especially install things into system areas that affect all users. There is a concept in malicious software called drive-by download. So a lot of ads will now have this thing, a drive-by download, just by viewing the ad on a website. A malicious ad can download this program into your computer. If you're an administrator, you're already a specialized user. That program can install itself into the operating system, which is what makes it so dangerous.
Why do some things still demand a password from me and that would not?
It depends on where they're trying to go in the OS. And most malware wants to be installed in the launch agents, it's called, so that when you reboot your computer, it loads again. A standard user doesn't have permission to install software. But if you want to install software, the box pops up and says, enter the administrator name and password. Then you can.
So when Apple made that statement, they left out the part about how the standard user would have to essentially change their administrator.
Right, they'd have to enter administrator credentials to install something. So it's technically correct. The standard user cannot install software unless they know the administrator account credentials.
I mean, it's good. Their statement was simply that yes, the standard user could, but so they were leaving out the part about if they change it to an administrator. I guess I don't know. But,
basically, yes.
Okay.
So
in other words, one quick takeaway from this is that your statement that it would be safer to use the thing as a standard user most of the time is correct.
Right, especially because then the malware can't install itself in the operating system, which means it can't survive a reboot. So it might be able to install itself in user memory, but it would be removed if the user logs out or the computer's rebooted. So that's why you need to be an administrator to install most software.
Better off being a guest?
No. Well, guest is another user yet. So to make yourself a standard user, there used to be a long, complicated option, but it's been a lot easier now.
When you get to this, I got to start writing. Almost verbatim what you tell me because
Yeah.
I had the devil of a time with this.
This is being recorded.
Yeah, and you can go back and rewatch the YouTube video too.
Okay, so there is a
Welcome, guys.
Well, anyway, but let me try to. So you're going to talk about changing, because you see, I think in the course of this process, I got notes here, and I'm going to look at them. I created a second.
Right, so that's the first thing. You go to your system preferences, and then go to users and groups. Now, even as an administrator, this is a pretty deep thing to do, create a new user. So I have to click the padlock to prove that I am the administrator. And so this is one of the main reasons you should have a password on your computer, even if it is just you doing it. Because when you do something that has consequences, you still need to put in a password, which keeps you from screwing up. And one of the things we've seen is bad guys. You're at like a public coffee shop. You go up to get a new cup of coffee. If you don't have a password on your computer, the bad guy can come in and within 15 seconds make a username on your computer, and you won't know it's there. And then he or she at their table can then log into your computer and copy all your files. So you really, really want to have a password. So I will type in my password here. Now there's a plus button at the bottom of the user list. So I am currently logged in as the admin account. So this is showing me that I have an admin account. I also have another account called managed and another account called guest, which we'll talk about in a few moments. So I'm going to hit the plus button, and I can make a new account to either be an administrator or standard or managed. Managed usually is for kids with parental controls. You can control the hours of the day they can log in, how much time they can spend log in, what websites they can go to, usually for kids. But I have seen a lot of companies use that for their employees so that they don't surf Facebook all day long. So I'm going to make a new administrator user. Yes, you can have multiple administrators. So I'm going to make a new, I'm going to call it new admin. I'm going to give it a password. Now, if you want, the little password or the little padlock icon will suggest a password for you. And so there are different types of passwords, memorable passwords, letters and numbers. If you're a government agency, you need to use a FIPS 181 compliant password. And you can control how long a password you want. And you get a sort of a bar of how good a password that is. The longer the password is, the better it is. The better mix of uppercase and lowercase, the better your password can be when it's shorter, because it's harder to brute force when there's more characters. So if your password is just 26 lowercase characters, there's a finite number of combinations of 26 characters. If you add uppercase, now you got 52 characters. You add symbols, now you got 64 characters. You add special characters, now you've got 200 different characters it could be. And say you have a 10 character password, what is that? 2 to the 200 to the 10th or 10 to the 200th? Yeah, 10 to the 200th number of possibilities of characters. So that makes your password very hard to guess. There is one called memorable, which is generally, it's a word, a number, and a word. You don't want your password to be a single word because there's something called a dictionary attack. The bad guy will feed a dictionary in, and if your word is a dictionary word, they'll have your password. So 2 words separated by numbers. So something that is difficult to guess, easy for you to remember. And you can also create a hint. I don't think it's smart enough. Your hint should not be your password, because then when the bad guy at the coffee shop sits down, if you type your password wrong 3 times, the hint comes up. And if the hint is your password, now he's in your computer. So the hint should tell you, give you a hint as to what your password is, but it shouldn't be your actual password. And then I'm going to create the user.
So at this point, you have created a new administrative user.
A new administrative user, yes.
Are you going to turn one of your other administrators into a standard user?
Yes.
Now, this is the part I
can't show it here because the way the projection works. So what you would then do is log out of your current administrator user.
So your previous administrative user was Apple CIDER.
It was Apple CIDER. So this is the user I'm currently logged in as. And I have made another user, so this is under the other users line. I've made another user that's an admin.
Right. But you are in as Apple CIDER, so you're going to log out.
Log out of Apple CIDER. So now you notice in my current user, there's a checkbox that says allow this user to administer this computer. I can't uncheck that because I'm logged in as that user. So I can't change my user status while I'm logged in as that user. So I'm going to log out as that user, log in as the other user, the other admin user. Then I can go and uncheck that box, which will then turn that user into a standard user.
All right, now hold on a second. So in other words, you went in as the new administrative user,
Right.
and you went down to the old.
Then the old admin user and uncheck allow user to administer.
Because I didn't do the part about logging out.
Right. You can't change the user you're logged in as. And you must make another admin user in order to revoke administrator rights to the first user. Now that's the old instructions used to say log in as root to do it, because root can do that. The problem is if now you've turned off all your admin users, you can't administer anything except with root, and root is really, really, really dangerous. And you can't turn root back on. So you can go and turn root off. You can't turn root back on without being an admin.
Yeah, so you don't want to burn that last.
Right. So generally, don't mess with root. Leave root off, so you don't have to worry about root. So as a standard user, you have less permission to do things, which means that the drive-by downloads of most malware can't install. They'll pop up and ask, if they want to install, they'll ask for your administrator credentials. And then you can stop and think a second, why is this website asking me for my password? So if something asks for your password, it's trying to install. And if you didn't specifically go out and ask for this program to be installed, it's probably malicious.
No, I have a related, I think you solved my problem, I hope. I'm not going to try it here. But when I get home and feel like it's sometime, I will do that. But my question then is, if I succeed in doing that, and the user that I am now becomes a standard user.
Right.
Okay, maybe I just solved my problem. Yeah, because I was creating a new standard user. That would have been a problem.
The instructions used to be make a new standard user and copy all your stuff to it.
Well,
that's very hard to do.
Well, thank you. That because my problem was, okay, now the home folder belongs to that old administrative user.
And you can't see it. So one of the ways the Mac security works is in the users folder, you cannot see. So here's, if I go to my users folder, I cannot see anything in that other folder. Even though I'm an admin, I still can't see that folder. And I don't have permission to see that folder. Now the root can, because the root is God. But even as an admin,
God is bad.
yeah, well, God can do anything he wants. Even though God can do bad things too. Yeah. Yeah. With a lowercase g. And so as a standard user, it's safer from malware. If you do ever want to install something, you can give it your administrator credentials, or sometimes you actually need to log into your admin account in order to do that. But that's getting to be less and less common.
I apologize.
Some programs you must actually be logged in as the administrator to install. It's not good enough to be a standard user and type your administrator credentials.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
but
what you're saying is the simpler situation is you have to put in the administrator's name and password, but you're actually doing that
as a standard user, yeah. And that's mostly from the olden days when we had disks and CDs and floppies that you installed from. Nowadays, almost everything is downloaded from the internet. And if to be absolutely safest, only download stuff from the App Store, because Apple vets that before they make it available.
Right. But in other words, in some cases, you would have to log out and log back in as the administrative user.
Well, one of the tricks is you don't have to log out to log in as another user. Under login options, so we're back in system preferences under users and groups. Under login options, there is an option called fast user switching. And what that lets me do is I can log in as a different user. So I'm logged in as one user, I'm going to log in again as the other user. That does have an effect of slowing your computer down, because now you're logging in twice, and each user may have their own apps running. This kind of harkens back to the days of multi-user mainframe computers, where you had one giant computer in the basement and 100 people using it. Our personal computers are powerful enough that you can do that with one or two users. So you don't necessarily have to log out, because when you log out, it quits all your open apps and closes everything you're doing. So you could, if you wanted, just log in as the other user.
So the fast user switching menu is the one up in the right corner that shows
Which shows your name, yep. And you can have it be the full name or just an icon. I like turning that on even if I don't have other users, because it reminds me that I'm logged in as the admin user.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what that is. Because when I was playing around, I did do that at one point. It seemed to, let's put it this way, it was not fast.
Yeah, it slows everything down,
Right.
especially on older computers with limited RAM. Yeah.
Until
Yeah.
finally the new screen came.
And the two other security settings you can put here, automatic login, you can turn that off. So the bad guy doesn't reboot your computer and it automatically logs into your desktop and they have all your stuff. So with automatic login off, you have to put in a username and password in order to get to your stuff. I also like that because then it helps you remember your password. We have so many people every day dropping their computers off. We ask them what their password is, they don't remember. Or they'll say I don't have one. And yes, you do. You created it when you set the computer up. You may not have to use it very often, but you do have one. And if they don't remember it, there are some things we can't do to fix their computer without their password. Excuse me. Or what's worse is they guess wrong, and then we have to call them to get the right password, and that delays the repair. And then they're mad because it took so long. Well, if you give us the right information, it wouldn't take so long. So that having yourself run as a standard user can be a lot safer. Also, on that login window, you get a picture and the username, and all you have to type is a password. Technically, that means only one piece of information is needed. If you have a box that says enter your name and password, now for someone to get into your computer, they need two pieces of information: the name and the password. And that makes it harder for a bad guy to get into your computer. They might know Steve. Well, in this case, they wouldn't know Apple CIDER. They might know your first name, but they may not know your last name. And when you create the user the very first time, the username is your first name and last name, because the setup process asks you for first name, last name, address, and all that stuff. And your username is your first name space last name. We actually see sometimes people's usernames will be first name space last name, because they in the first name field they type first name space and then last name. The system automatically puts a space in for you between your first name and your last name. So if you type first name space, you end up with two spaces in your name. Doesn't really matter. It's just there's two spaces. Then when you do need to type it, you got to remember there's two spaces. So a lot of people like turning the list off and give the name and password. Now it also depends on personal computer versus work computer, how sensitive your work is, how secure you want to be. And then the other half of that is the screensaver password, which is under, I'm back to under security and privacy. You can turn on a screensaver password. So you get up to go refill your coffee, and your screensaver locks and needs a password to get back in. So you didn't have to log out completely or shut down, but there's still a password so the bad guy can't jump on your computer. Now, I usually set mine to 5 seconds because I accidentally turn my screensaver on every now and then. But you can say immediately. And so as soon as the screensaver begins, now it will activate the password. Now, since I'm doing something administrative, I'm changing a setting, I need to enter my administrator credentials. Now, it fills in the administrator name for me because I am the administrator. If I were a standard user, I'd have to fill in the administrator name myself.
You are, in other words, right now, doing what you're doing, you are logged in as an administrative user.
Yes.
Okay.
So it fills in the name for me because that is an administrator. And I will leave that off. And then back to what we were talking about earlier. I checked. Snopes is a great place to go to see if things you read on the internet are true. And so the Wall Street Journal story is true. Depending on what city you were in, the headline was different. But what's really annoys me more is this is from September 2017. I'm sorry, September 2016. So it's more than a year old, but it's making its way around the internet again. So a lot of times these stories are old, whether they're true or false, they're old. I'm trying to see if it says what city it was in that the headlines were different. Let's see. And they're printed at different times. Okay, not different times, not different cities. And so, all right. So before, in this case, Trump met with the vice president or the president of Mexico. It was, let's see, edition on the left was published after. So before he met with him, it was talks tough. After he met with him, it was softens his tone.
So you remember the movies where like they gotta hurry to make the late edition?
Yeah. So there's a new edition of the paper, and it's different. And so apparently I mean, if you zoom in on there, something that
Both of those headlines were, in a sense, correct or pertinent.
yes. So the 2 stars versus 4 stars. So this is the second edition. This is the 4th edition. So yeah, in this specific case, they were both correct, but the pro-Trump people are using this as a rallying point about fake news. The news is the newspapers are lying to you because the same paper used different headlines depending on where it was. And in this case, it's not where it was; it's when it was.
It's like probably like the big paper, like they have different editions. I mean, I remember when the
Yeah.
Rochester paper used to have a morning and an afternoon.
Yeah.
You know, but then
And in this case, I wonder how much of the article was different too.
But it just sounds like, unfortunately, if I understood correctly, that the one to our right is the later edition.
Let me see what it said.
More stars, right?
Because I would expect the tough tone before the talks and then the softening after the talks or something.
The paper on the left came off the press earlier in the day, and the paper on the right was later. So this is earlier, and this is later. Yeah.
well, I think he was being nice to him when he first met him.
Yeah. So the left paper was before he met with the president. The right paper is after. Yeah, it changes his turn. It changes his tone depending what he does. Yeah.
And it was on, you looked at that
So
was on Snopes?
yeah, so Snopes is one of the most well-known fact-checking sites. Although some of the pro-Trump people say that Snopes is fake because it debunks a lot of his claims.
I got one or two hopefully quick things that I would like to bring up to
Sure.
follow up on what I was somewhere in here. You know, the users and groups thing. There's users and groups, and there's also a security thing and system preferences. And one of them allowed me to change my password because the password I put on this thing 10 years ago was kind of wimpy, so I decided to beef that up. And I'm not sure whether you can do it in both of those, but somewhere in there you can.
Users and groups allows you to change your current password. The trick is you need to know what your password is to change it.
Well, yeah, and I'm okay with that one. But also, if you go into security and privacy under general, it says a login password has been set for this user, and it gives you an option of changing the password.
Yes, because so security, you can also change your password, because that's where you can set it to require a password on screensaver.
Right. And, okay, yeah. And so that's what you were just talking about. I was looking under display and screensaver. It's under security and privacy. You just have to.
Yeah, so setting the screensaver is under screensaver.
Yeah.
Setting the security on the screensaver is under security. I could see it being on both,
But,
or a little checkbox down at the bottom saying require password
yeah.
on the screensaver setting.
Yeah. Also, I'm back in El Capitan for what it's worth. Now, the thing is that, so am I correct in thinking that the password to which it is referring here in security and privacy is the same password it's referring to in users and groups?
Yes, depending. So this password in security and privacy, it's a password set for this user. It's the user you are currently logged in as. That's what it's referring to. In users and groups, you change the password of the user you have selected, not necessarily the user you're logged in as.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll buy that. All right. So here's the deal. I did that, and every now and then, a little reminder will slide in from the right-hand side that says, "Do you want to finish changing your password?" Now, I changed that password because it works. I know it. Okay, but see, I think what this has to do, what happens is if you say no, then it goes away. You say whatever, more information or something like that. I believe it opens up the preferences, settings, or whatever for iCloud.
So it is one of the options in later systems is to use your iCloud password as your computer password.
Right.
So Apple has done that to cut down on the number of passwords you need to remember.
Right.
And if you forget your computer password, you can then reset the password using your iCloud password.
Now, I thought maybe my iCloud password was the same as my Apple ID password.
Yes, Apple ID. So Apple ID is the general category of password. And your Apple ID is used for iCloud. It's used for iTunes. It's used for App Store. It's used for Bookstore. So some people call it the iCloud password, the iTunes password, the iBook Store password. In general, it's called the Apple ID password because it encompasses everything from Apple.
So, in other words, what I might do the next time that shows up is go along with the game.
See what it's asking you to change.
And then decide whether I want to go along with it or not.
Yeah.
Because the other one is really just logging in your computer.
Logging into your computer, yeah. Some people like to have the same. Well, now what's interesting is you can have the same password for your computer and your Apple ID, but they're not tied together. You just typed in the same word on both sides. The new feature of using your Apple ID as your computer password actually makes them tied to be the same thing, and as a way of then making you only remember one password, that's a little easier. And you can reset your Apple ID password on the internet. I forgot.apple.com will let you reset your Apple ID password. If you forget your computer password, you're screwed, sort of, unless you have another admin. So I am an admin. I can go in and change the passwords of these other accounts. So if you have another admin account, you can change the password of the account you're in. So even if you're an admin or if you're a standard user, if you can remember the password of that other account to log in to the other admin account, you can then change the password of your first account.
No, I'm thinking, gee, should I create an extra admin account? No, not me, not for me personally.
Some people do recommend having two accounts is good, making sure one of them is an admin. So if you always use your admin account, have a second admin account in case something goes wrong with your main admin account. But if you're a standard user, having another account that's an admin is a bonus for troubleshooting.
Having 2 admin accounts?
Having 2 accounts, if one of them, especially if one of them is an admin. So if you are always logged in as an admin, have a second admin account.
I think what I'm gonna aim for is to have the switcheroo we did talk about earlier, so I end up with 1 admin and
One admin and one standard that you use all the time.
all the time.
Yep.
Now,
Hang on a second, Charlie.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. So signing in to local Wi-Fi by itself would not ask for your Apple ID. However, if you have iCloud Keychain turned on, iCloud Keychain synchronizes passwords to the cloud, so then your other devices get the password. So it would want your iCloud password to save the JCC Wi-Fi password to iCloud, so then your other devices would know the JCC password. It's on by default, unless you've turned it off, and then it may not be back on. And it may be unrelated. You just now connected to the internet, so now iCloud wants to verify and update its information. And every now and then, iCloud will ask for your password to make sure it's really still you.
It didn't ask me because I've been here and.
Right. So once the password, for example, in this case, the Wi-Fi password is saved in your keychain, when you come back, it won't ask you for the password again. Yeah. And in general, it's okay to save passwords on your device as long as you have a good password on the device itself that people can't get into easily.
it also seems to me like the passwords for accessing Wi-Fi are in kind of a different category from passwords in general, like for shopping accounts or something like that. Am I right? Because what I'm thinking is I don't, to my knowledge, really use keychain. And yet, once any of my devices has a password for it, Wi-Fi, I can come back in a year or 2 and it'll be fine. It'll just go to it.
Yeah, you're using keychain without realizing it because it's built into the OS. So there's sort of several, and then we'll get to your question, Rick. There's several classes of passwords we like to talk about. Passwords that involve money are the most important and should be the hardest to guess, the most complex passwords, the longest passwords. So your bank account, Amazon, PayPal, your Apple ID, because there's money involved there, generally should have a longer password because it's more valuable. It's a more valuable target. Then there are sometimes what I call the middle layer passwords, which could be something like a Wi-Fi password, which by itself isn't that important, but it's a foothold. So if you have a weak Wi-Fi password, a bad guy's sitting in his car out in front of your house, or maybe in front of the neighbor's house, because Wi-Fi goes a few hundred feet. If he guesses your password, he's into your network. Now everything he does is going through your house. He does something bad, the police trace it to your house. So you don't want them to have that foothold. So Wi-Fi passwords generally you want to be fairly difficult to get into, because bad guys use that. It's called war driving. You drive around looking for Wi-Fi to break into. And then there's kind of the throwaway passwords where I'm going to put a comment on this website. I'll probably never go back to it again. It doesn't need to be that secure a password. But you definitely don't want to make the passwords. You don't want to use the same password on more than one site, because whenever there's a password breach, everyone then knows those passwords. So in one of the most recent examples, the Target breach, the Home Depot breach, the Equifax breach, if you use the same password you did at Target that you do at Amazon, the bad guy now has your Amazon password, which has your credit card on it, which they'll log in and buy stuff and change the shipping address. So there's a website we've talked about, Have I Been Pwned? You put in your email address, and it will tell you if that email address has ever been leaked. And my work address has been leaked several times. And so you want to be sure that any password you used at any of these services that has been leaked, you're not using anywhere else, just in case the bad guys will try somewhere else. Now, a lot of people say they don't have anything worth stealing, but you have an identity and you have a layer of anonymity. So if the bad guy can use your computer to break the law, that's a layer away from the police finding him. And it can be kind of scary. What's a little funny is there's two spam bots, two spam lists got leaked. So the bad guys are breaking into other bad guys.
Okay, it says, oh no, pawn on one breach site and found no paste.
So one account, if you scroll down, it will tell you what
Oh, I see.
what account was leaked. So LinkedIn was a big one. Adobe was a big one.
Yep, it was LinkedIn, which I haven't been on.
And that's one of the problems.
And I don't
It could
even
be
know my password.
it could be a service that you used years ago that that you don't use anymore. And LinkedIn is an especially interesting one because the original hack was 2012, but in 2016, all of those stolen passwords went up for sale on the dark web. So if you never used LinkedIn, someone has your password. And so you use it for a little bit and then stopped using it, they have your password. So LinkedIn made everyone reset their password. So in 2012, you would have gotten an email saying reset your password. And then when it came around again in 2016, you would have gotten another email saying reset your password. And so if you didn't do that, if your LinkedIn password is the same as another password you've used somewhere else, the bad guys have that password.
So I don't know what my LinkedIn password is.
And that's a reason to use Keychain because you can look up what your passwords are. Rick.
I noticed that I've got some expired certificates, and I want to delete them, but it's not letting me do it. I don't know why.
So Keychain is a system feature, and you can access your Keychain by going to your applications folder, and then the utilities folder, and then the Keychain utility, and that will show you all of the items that you have saved in your Keychain, or more likely that the computer has saved for you. So whenever you log in someplace, a lot of times there's a checkbox that says save password. And that will save the password in your Keychain. And so if you want to go and see what a password was, where's something we can do that doesn't in applications and then utilities.
Oh, okay.
You can open a Keychain. I'm trying to find something here that I don't mind. I just won't show it. You open, double click a Keychain item. So here's a password, and you click on Show Password, and then it asks for your administrative password. So all of your passwords are saved by your administrative password. So you type in your admin password. I'm going to say deny, and it would show you what the current password is. Oh, I got an idea. Let's do, I can search at the top. So TechAge. So TechAge class. So if I double click on that, hit show password, put in my admin password, it shows me the password that's saved. And that's not a very private password here. Anyone that comes in can ask for the password. So
Are you on the TechAge class? Because if you're on the JCC one, that's not a secure website, but
yeah.
But this is secure, just so you know. Like, I didn't know the password. Joel Elias 21. Now everyone on your program knows.
Yeah.
But you're right. it does, everybody does.
Oh, wow.
So did you click on the keys at the application?
Yep.
Okay.
And then you can see what your passwords were. Pardon? Tech Age class.
Yeah, whatever.
And the other thing Keychain can store is notes. So you can make a secure note that's encrypted so no one can get into it without a password. And so I can do, let's see, this is a note. And hello. And let's say, well, let's call it Tech Age, and we'll say password. And I'll never be able to answer it again. So then you can add a note. The other thing Keychain has are certificates. Certificates are part of the security chain of trust on the internet. So when you go to a website, we talked about this a little bit Wednesday. When you go to a website that's encrypted, there'll be a little padlock, and that tells you the website is encrypted. And the encryption has a certificate, which means this website had to prove they were who they said they were. That certificate is signed by a certificate authority, and that certificate authority has taken the authority to make sure these people they say they are, so they can encrypt the data, and you can trust that this site is who it says it is because it's encrypted. And the chain of trust from this website to the certificate authority to the root authority is how encryption on the internet works. Every certificate has an expiration date from a few months to a few years. And when those certificates expire, you can get an error message. And we did this Wednesday, applecider.com. Oh, it's gone. Since we were there Wednesday, it's gone. It was, let me try forcing security. Here it is. So applecider.com, the security certificate expired 230 days ago, and they haven't renewed. So that's a bad sign that may mean this website is less than reputable. Now, it's possible for big websites to have their certificates expire, usually not more than a day or so, usually not more than an hour or so before somebody notices and renews it. So that's why Safari is giving me this warning. Thank you. That this may not be trusted. Now, sometimes that means your clock is wrong. So they're warning me, is my clock wrong? And is it really, 230 days ago, last year? So maybe my clock is set wrong, and that's why the certificate time is coming up wrong. And so certificates can expire. So this expired July 2017. And it was signed by Thought, who is also a root CA. So at the time, this was a trusted certificate, but they have since let it expire, not renewed it. So this company at this website is probably not reputable. In fact, they're probably gone, and that's why it doesn't work. So when you have certificates that expire, they should, in fact, we'll sort by expiration date here, they should automatically get renewed by the other end. And in fact, most of these, especially the root certificates, expire in decades. There's also, I don't have any. Let's see. No, here's some. You also have certificates that you accept on your computer from a site you go to. And so a lot of these certificates, so I've got some Apple certs here. These are all old certificates that have since expired. And if a website tries to use it, it will warn me that this is not a valid certificate. So one example here is iChat. The iChat text messaging, a messaging service, encrypts your data end to end. Well, iChat was discontinued years ago and replaced by the Messages app, but the certificate's still here because it just was never deleted. Now I should be able to hit delete and have that certificate get deleted. Let me try delete certificate. Delete. And it did delete. So if it's one of your certificates, you should be able to delete it. If it's a system certificate, you probably shouldn't. Now, Rick, do you remember which certificate it is, or do you have your computer here? Which category is the certificate under that you can't delete? And that's unusual. None of your root certificates, expired certificates, should be in there because they should have been replaced by updated certificates. One of the crazy things is that there's 170 system certificates, and one of the things we always joked about, there it is, Hong Kong Post Office. The Hong Kong Post Office is a root certificate authority, so they have authority to issue a certificate for any website in the world. It's likely the Hong Kong Post Office is controlled by the Chinese government. So a bad guy or a state-sponsored actor, we sometimes call them, can get a legitimate security certificate for a fake website because they're a root authority. And one of the things we sometimes see is what's called a homonym attack. You see if it's still there. PAYPA1.com. If you don't look close enough, yeah, they bought it. PAYPA1 looks like PayPal, and for a while it was a fake PayPal. And it would steal your PayPal credentials and then run things up on your PayPal money. Eventually, PayPal bought them and redirects it to the real PayPal.com. And we see that a lot. Businesses have to buy misspellings of their own name so that when someone misspells their name, they still go to the right place. There was also one for a while where instead of an A, it was the Greek letter alpha, which looks like an A. There was also one where it was a Unicode A instead of an ASCII A, so it looks legitimate, but it isn't. So there's been a big issue in fake URLs where people just don't look at the address close enough.
What you just said there, Unicode versus ASCII, does that mean that visually the character is identical?
Yes.
But the way it operates is different?
Yep.
So in other words, I could not look at that and tell that it was not legitimate, right?
Yeah. So visually it looks exactly alike, but the computer sees it as different. Let's see. We had one on web. We had one on the website that we talked about where you are. Is that it? And the one they used was Apple. I wonder if I can find it in the Soundbites forums. He was using Apple as an example, and the A was a Unicode A, not an ASCII A. So it didn't it didn't look any different than a real ASCII code. Let's see, fake. So you really have to. We've sort of trained people to look at the website, and if you're on a banking site, make sure you see the padlock and it's encrypted. But now we have to go beyond that to have people make sure all the letters are right too. So did you find is it in my certificates or is it under certificates? So my guess is under system roots you cannot delete them. Try highlighting one and then using the delete command from the file menu. or right click on it and hit delete. So can I delete the Hong Kong post office? Copy, export. Yeah, I cannot delete root certificates. Why they've expired is a bigger question.
Well, I do see that this one, there's another one with the same.
So it's been replaced by a newer certificate.
Yeah, up until 2037. So, but as to why the old one didn't go away is beyond me.
Yeah, so when the new certificate came in, it should have deleted the old certificate in order to make room for the new certificate. Probably have to be a root user. Makes sense. You have to be a root user to delete the root certificates.
I can do that.
Yeah.
I probably have to go through the terminal then.
Yep, here's a terminal command to do it. Or enable the root user in directory utility and do it there. But why did they expire? I don't want to do any of that. I just want to get in and see the question. And for a lot of people that just want to remove all of those weird root certs, you don't need the Hong Kong Post Office certificate. Yeah, everyone's giving terminal commands.
Do they, is there any harm in leaving them there?
There is potential harm that a foreign government that has control of that cert can issue a certificate and you go to somewhere where they're spying on you. But the same is probably true of our own NSA or CIA. They probably have a certificate under a shell company anyway, because it's so easy to become a root cert. But the industry does police it pretty good. They just Symantec got caught playing loose with certificates, and Google first started distrusting all Symantec certificates, which is interesting because Symantec bought VeriSign, which was the first certificate authority. What was it? Yeah. There was another, the WoSign and StartCom were two Chinese certificate authorities. Were they Chinese, I think? And they were issuing improper certificates. And so Mozilla and Google started distrusting them in their browsers. And then eventually those certificates have been removed from everybody's root stores. It's someone probably Steve Gibson on Security Now was talking, refers to it as printing money. So if you become a root certificate, people pay you a whole bunch of money to give them bits, and then they get a little padlock on their website. And VeriSign, as the first certificate authority, used to charge thousands of dollars for a certificate. Now there are most of the legitimate certificate authorities, the certs are relatively inexpensive, and there's a free certificate authority called Let's Encrypt. It's command line driven, so it's not easy for average people to use it. But more and more websites are now going encrypted because of the mostly because of the Snowden allegations that the NSA is spying on everybody's web traffic. They capture every bit of web traffic and sift through it. So if you go to an encrypted page, they can't see what you're doing. So more and more websites are starting to be encrypted. Now I think.
I've also got iMessage signing keys. I've got like a ton of these things in my keychain login. Can I just get rid of those?
The iMessage signing keys are used by iMessage to encrypt messages. So if you delete those keys, you won't be able to encrypt those messages to those people.
We've got hundreds
For everybody you ever sent a message to, probably.
I have a bunch too, and I never use iMessage. Does it do it for every message I send?
Probably. And every person you send it to gets a different key.
And it doesn't have any expiration date. It says it's a private key.
Yeah, private keys don't expire. Let me see if I can find if I have any. Yeah. So I've got public private key pairs for anybody I've ever messaged. I've got 94 of them.
Wouldn't it just create a new one the next time you send a message so you get to the old one?
So if you delete the old one, it probably would create a new one the next time, but then you won't be able to read the previous messages that were encrypted with the previous key.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So all your old messages kind of become useless to you.
Yeah. So all your messages are encrypted under your encryption key. And what gets interesting is if you so you're chatting with one person, there's two keys on every message, yours and theirs. You put three people in it, you got three keys. So one of the things that is possible, the FBI keeps complaining about the internet going dark because they can't eavesdrop on everybody anymore. And they're mad at Apple for making it too hard to break into phones. So they keep talking about having a back door into messaging. And the problem with a back door is that if the FBI has it, then now the bad guys will have it, because we know nobody can keep a secret. But you don't necessarily need a bad door. You could have two front door locks. So you have two front door keys. Think about a hotel room. You've got your room key, and then there's a master key. So theoretically, Apple could put a key on every message that they could decrypt the messages. That would require revamping the entire messaging network, and they probably won't do it because they don't want to have that power. They don't want to be able to respond to subpoenas. We cannot turn over this information. We value our customers' privacy too much. What's the big one? WhatsApp has gotten into trouble, especially in Brazil. Seems like every year, some Brazilian court orders WhatsApp to turn over their data, and the president of WhatsApp Brazil says we can't. It's encrypted, and he gets thrown in jail. And the court orders WhatsApp shut down. And a billion Brazilian users scream bloody murder, and it comes back on in a day. So WhatsApp is one of the more secure messaging apps that very similar to iMessage. They cannot be broken into without the password. Although I did just hear on Security Now, there are fake apps. A researcher found fake security apps. Here it is. It was on the dark Caracal. That button. Where is it? Fake apps. Let's see. Signal. There's the Caracal. There it is. So Trojanized versions of these very popular messaging apps have been found in the wild. And so if you don't download the app from the developer, especially WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is huge all over the world except the US, basically. If you didn't download it from the manufacturer, you may have a fake version that has a surveillance software built into it. So everything you thought you were sending privately is not private because the bad guys have stuck a key in that app. And every now and then we see this with fake apps get removed from websites. Google announced they removed over 1 million malicious apps from the Play Store last year, which sounds good until you realize there's a million malicious apps on the Play Store. So always download software you want from the manufacturer in order to be sure you're getting the real app and not a fake one. Although that doesn't always help. What was it? Was it Transmit? There was a Mac FTP app, I think it was Transmit, that someone broke into their company server and put a malicious version. Yep, it was Transmit. Or not Transmit, Transmission. Put a malicious version of the program on the company's server. So for a few days, anyone downloading the app from the company's original server was getting a malicious version of the app because a bad guy broke in and put a fake app on the server. It actually happened. I think it would happen twice for Transmission, and it was signed by a developer, and everything looked legitimate, but it had a Trojan horse in it. And so there were, I forget how many, might say in here somewhere, how many people downloaded it over that couple of day time period that are now vulnerable because they installed a malicious app from a legitimate company. So even when you do download apps from the right company, there's a potential it could be fake. It's very, very difficult days here on the internet. Yeah. Well, as Steve Gibson was joking about that, that the only way to be sure is to meet face to face, naked, whispering in each other's ears, so that
In a remote area.
in the middle of a remote area that no one could be eavesdropping on, and cover your mouth so lip readers can't see you. So it's really interesting. Let's see. I'm still trying to find that other fake website. But while I'm looking for that, anyone else have another question?
Just going back to that, when we were on that site, have I been pawned?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you hear that, like Yahoo had this big
Yep.
thing.
Every Yahoo password has been breached. If you have a Yahoo account, your password has been lost. Change your password at Yahoo immediately, and if you use that.
I had done that, but I went to the I put in my Yahoo account, and it said there was nothing there. Was that because I changed my password?
That's because it hasn't been added to the database yet.
Because what hasn't been? Really?
The billion Yahoo account. It's just now coming to light. Yeah.
But I mean, it was over a year ago or so, wasn't it, that I changed the password?
Well, that doesn't matter when you change the password. It's when the breach gets reported.
Well, but I changed it as a result of the breach being reported, I thought. So it takes that long?
Sometimes it can, yeah. I didn't want to click on that.
So I don't know what I was looking at, and maybe I just can't do it.
But would it, if I, it has nothing to do with the fact that I changed my password, though.
Correct.
The information that it's given.
Right. So if you scroll down the list on that page, it will tell you what breaches they have listed.
The only breach that I saw was on one of my accounts. It was an Adobe breach.
Yeah, Adobe was another popular one. So if you ever downloaded a trial of like Photoshop, or in the early days even to get Flash, you had to create an Adobe account.
Okay, what have I done? I was trying to get out.
You asked it to do something, and it wants your password to allow doing that.
All I wanted to do was get out of here now.
So hit cancel. So you cancel whatever you told it to do.
Girl, it doesn't care.
Yeah, that's so iCloud Helper wants your keychain password. Hit cancel. Keychain access, once your password, hit cancel.
Oh, okay, so,
Just keep hitting cancel until it goes away.
Oh, okay. I got it.
And then quit without trying to do whatever you told it to do.
Okay, I see, thank you.
Second cookie when you have time for it.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
The Monroe County Library website. I cannot access that from my MacBook in either Safari or Chrome. If I use my iPad, it goes right to it, no problem.
So the Monroe County Library website, libraryweb.org,
Yeah,
doesn't work. What happens instead?
it just gets stuck. Doesn't do it. Starts in the key original.
Any error message ever come up?
No.
Clear your cache. Try it in private mode. Yeah, try it in private mode. Then that might tell you there's a cache or cookie causing it to get stuck.
Okay. All right. What is the difference between? I should Google it and read about it. I guess I've never understood cache.
The cache saves things on a website. Icons, graphics, with the assumption that when you go back to that website, it can load the items from cache faster than downloading them again from the internet. And that was much more true back in the old dial-up days, and when the web was a lot more static than it is now. These days, websites change so frequently that the cache doesn't really help much anymore. And high-speed internet is so ubiquitous that it's usually better off downloading what you have. So a lot of times the cache doesn't, well, it's not that it doesn't have much in it, it's just not used as much anymore because everything changes so fast. But it is possible, so like the Monroe County Library System logo probably doesn't change very often, so that's in your cache. If something gets messed up in the cache, it can cause the website to stall loading because your browser is trying to load it from cache versus downloading it again. Eventually, it will give up loading from cache and should then go download the resource again. So that's why private browsing often works, because it ignores your cache and just downloads everything directly.
I just went into private and tried to do it from the bookmark I had, and it didn't work. So I did it by, typing it, googling it essentially, and it's still stuck. Weird.
Now it's working for me in Safari. Maybe your Safari's too old, although I wouldn't think that would be a problem. You said you're running El Capitan, so you've got a fairly new Safari.
Yeah, I mean, I should be able to, in About Safari, it'll tell me what version it is running.
Yeah.
11.0.3.
Yeah, that's the version I'm running on High Sierra. You sure you're not on High Sierra?
Well,
Go to the Apple menu and About This Mac.
Safari version 11.0. Whoops, hold on a minute. What's going on here? Why did that happen? It initially, it was a Safari thing. For the, it's El Capitan for 10.11.6.
So 10.11 must be new enough to run the latest Safari. So probably 10.5 can't run the current Safari. Eventually, the OS stops being able to run the newest browsers.
Well, that's the subject of interest to me with my classic MacBook, because I know that at some point Chrome won't be supported. And my question is, when that happens, does it mean that I can use it but it's not safe, or does it mean it just won't work, period?
So when a browser becomes unsupported, it generally means the web technologies have moved beyond what that browser has built in. And one of the biggest examples is, for example, HTML5. So HTML5 is the latest web language in how websites are coded. So if your browser is too old to have HTML5 in it, it won't work. Many websites will check the browser you have, and if you have an older browser, it will give you a different website, either a um, like a mobile website or an alternate website in order to um, let it work anyway.
Or the same thing you were trying to go to. A little bit like Gmail has an HTML version for slow connection.
Yeah, there's the basic HTML for slower connections. Yeah.
Is clearing cache going to be in clearing history?
Yeah, the history and cache are linked together. Now both of my well, it's about time to shut down anyway.
Yeah, how soon do we have to be out of here?
About 5 o'clock. So we got a one or two last questions, and that should do it. Both my batteries are dead, or dying at 9%. That must mean so I haven't needed to charge my battery, my AirPod charger in a while. So this must be weak because it wasn't able to charge my my AirPods.
Can I just show you a quickie? I talked about
Yeah.
it. I think I can do it on your MacBook here. If you go into system preferences for iCloud, there you are. Just click on this.
I don't want to. So when you sign out of iCloud, it's going to ask if you want to delete everything.
That's the warning I got.
Yeah.
Right. And I said cancel, and then I clicked on the red ball.
Yeah.
And I got away without it.
Yeah. So generally, you don't want to sign out of iCloud because iCloud syncs all your devices.
I thought I was just signing out of the preferences for iCloud, but no.
No, you're signing out of iCloud. Yep. And then it asks if you want to delete or keep all the iCloud data that you have on your computer.
Right.
And that can be quite traumatic.
Yeah. So the answer was no. Okay.
Is that?
Mystery stays.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of neat that it does work on the iPad.
Yep.
I don't know what's going on.
Try a different browser. Try Chrome or Firefox just to see.
What I'm saying is the same thing happens in both Chrome and Safari.
Type it manually, libraryweb.org. Maybe there's something wrong in your bookmark.
Bookmark is www.3.
Yeah.
Library web.
That's where I keep getting pushed to.
Well, gosh, it's been fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I locked the keychain, and that's what created all this.
Created all what?
You know, I'm still getting these because I locked.
Yeah, you lock your keychain, so now nothing can get passwords. So you have to type the passwords in yourself.
Well, I don't know. Well, I just locked it because it was unlocked.
Right, it's unlocked, so the system can get to your passwords. So now you have to type your password in.
Oh, just my regular?
You have to type your keychain password in.
Okay. See,
Now, at the beginning, your keychain password is the same as your admin password. If you change your admin password, you might have to be sure to change your keychain password too. Because they can get out of sync and then it starts asking you for keychain passwords all the time.
But then it unlocked it.
Right. So now the system can get to your passwords when it needs them.
But yeah,
Oh, okay.
Where if you're thinking the way I'm thinking about that, it's like I don't want to go away and leave that unlocked.
Right.
Because it's the thing I only unlock to
Right.
change things. Then you're saying for keychain itself, the way it works, the function, it has to be unlocked.
Right. If you lock the keychain, then you have to type every password in.
Okay. Got it.
And so the thing is that if I change, for instance, I changed my password for my user name, that I need to go into keychain and change the password.
It should automatically change the keychain password also, but you'll get a warning if you have to do it manually.
I try to go to something that it would have consulted the keychain for the password to which.
Right.
What's the best way to print things off the web page?
Choose the print command.
Just print,
Yeah.
but then you get a lot of junk. And then what?
Well, yeah, in general, you don't print web pages. They're not designed to be printed. Because you get all the ads, you get all the borders, you get all the junk. Some websites will have a button that says printable version, which strips out all that out. Or you can use the reader mode that some websites have to strip out all the extra stuff and then print manually.
This was a sheet that a screenshot I saved, and because I was going to ask you about it, because like this is websites reader.
Yeah, so that's something that it's content on websites that you can allow access to. So you can see what websites you've said can use your microphone, or what websites that you've told it can use the camera. So you can go through all the different services, what plugins you have. For example, Java I've got. So what websites you've allowed to use Java. So it's a security measure to let you control what websites are doing on your computer.
Okay, but I don't know if I know it.
So if a website pops up and asks if it can use your camera, you be damn sure you want to let that website use your camera.
Right,
Yeah.
right, okay.
So a lot of people just say yes, 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 and then the website can turn the camera on and take pictures of you.
Not with Band-Aid over it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so under reader, why wouldn't you automatically let it use any websites?
Some websites don't have reader options.
Okay.
I use a reader thing and sometimes
Yeah.
some of the websites will say, we know you're using an ad blocker, turn it off, or you
Yep.
can't read this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't even. So
Reader was an interesting concept that has sort of fallen away because a lot of websites don't like you going into reader mode because you're turning off all the ads that pay for the website.
But it works on a lot of sites for me, and basically when I turn it on. Like,
Because sometimes you've already, it's because it loaded the full page with the ads, then you can turn reader mode on. But you can't leave reader mode on all the time.
Oh, is that in preferences for the page, probably?
No, it's in the address bar. The little block to the left of the address
Okay.
is the reader mode that strips all the ads and stuff out of the page to show you just the text on that page, basically. Just so it's like in the case I've got here, it's just the article, not all the rest of the ads around the article.
in Chrome is a Mercury reader, and I'll click on that sometimes. And part of the reason is that sometimes there's so much crap on the page that it scrolls very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, where did you?
So if I go into an article, in fact, here's an article. Chrome is going to put an ad blocker built in now. I get a reader icon next to that, next to the address.
Oh,
So I can turn
okay.
reader mode on, and now it's hiding all of the ads and extra stuff and showing me just the article.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
And many times you can then print that reader mode, so then you get just the article without all the rest of the ads and stuff.
Okay. One quick thing. Now, when you go like, say some text is cut off, is there a way to? Sometimes I adjust the percent to try to get it right. But
Yeah,
is there
you can try to hit the command minus to make the text smaller to fit, but it basically is that websites aren't designed to print.
Okay, but it isn't just well, like
Unless some of them will have a little button that says printable version,
right,
but not always.
Yeah.
So in this case, this
Command
one doesn't. Command minus makes the text smaller. Command plus makes it bigger.
Okay.
I had some fun. I was on a site and I was in the comments after an article, and they got into some stuff that was of interest to me that I wanted to save. So I selected the text and copied it.
Yeah, I and put it like.
Yeah, copy and paste it in text edit and print it from there.
Like document in Pages.
Yep.
And pasted it in, and I got just scattered crap on the thing and so on. So
Alrighty.
I then went to paste and match style.
Yeah.
Yep.
Paste special.
Alrighty, so that does it for another Saturday. All my batteries are dead.
You know, a lot of people I think are away.
Yep. And so we've got our board meeting coming up this Wednesday, and then next meeting, March 14th, will be our business meeting and elections. So we'll see you all then.
You just said about your vacation. Your wife said something about